Let's bring in Daniel Levin. He's a board member with the Liechtenstein Foundation for State Governance. So Dan, how much of a blow is this for Huawei, Google's latest decision?
Well, this in itself Huawei is far better prepared for this than, let's say, ZTE was, with being placed on the entity list last year before President Trump reversed that. Mainly because as a result of that, it has done two things. First of all, it has increased its development of its in-house chip-making capacity with high silicon. And secondly, because it has massively stockpiled chips and components in anticipation of this kind of a move. So I believe it's better suited. It certainly wouldn't be the type of death penalty it would have been for ZTE, but it's going to be a massive headache.
Is this going to stop consumers, Huawei customers, for purchasing the phones?
It's going to impact its smartphone business primarily outside of China, which is approximately 50% of its revenues, and smartphones themselves about 50% of global revenues. So it will impact it. Obviously, it's going to impact the 5G race directly and indirectly, but without a doubt, the question also is whether other players follow suit. Google did this with its open source Android system, so it affects primarily things such as proprietary apps and services. And while that's a headache, it would be far more disastrous if Microsoft, as an example, followed suit, because that's a closed source system, and that would affect all of Huawei's tablets and laptops. So the potential for contagion and making this a lot more nastier than it already is really there.
The Trump administration has essentially blacklisted Huawei. They argue the company is a security risk. They say it could be used as a tool for spying for Beijing. Talk to us about really the broader implication around the world, especially when it comes to Huawei's 5G network.
Well, the U.S. the Trump administration in particular, has been exerting pressures on allies worldwide to block Huawei from bidding or participating in 5G networks. Australia has followed suit. European countries have actually stalled that, in particular because they saw what happened with ZTE, where President Trump came in and saved the day, essentially, by reversing that ban or putting it on the entity list. They're worried that if they follow suit, that the U.S. will treat Huawei as a bargaining chip in the trade negotiations and reverse this, and they'll be just basically stuck out in the cold. So I believe you're seeing pushback, but it's a bit of a tricky situation because right now the charge is led not just by the White House, but also by the intelligence services. And what will really happen now, essentially, is you have 150 days to formalize this ban, out of which the first 80 days are done by the Department of Homeland Security, where they're going to determine which telecommunication services and components can create that kind of a threat to U.S. national security. Once that's completed, the Commerce Department has 70 more days to determine which companies and which countries are on that list. Now, once the Department of Homeland Security has completed its review, you essentially have an intelligence assessment, and that will be very hard to reverse. I don't believe that the White House will just be able to come in and reverse the same way it did with ZTE. So to some extent, this genie's out of the bottle. I don't think it's going to be quite that easy to smooth these waves.
You mentioned the trade negotiations. What do you make of the timing of all this? I mean, certainly those negotiations are really at a sensitive point here. Is China going to retaliate in some way?
Look, trade negotiations get nasty very quickly because the retaliation principle is far more virulent than it even is in real wars. So in a trade war, you have really no choice but to retaliate. In real wars, you have a concept even of mutually assured destruction that keeps parties from accelerating it. I think just to get some perspective, 30 years ago, at the end of the Cold War, the entire trade in nominal terms between the U.S. and Soviet Union was $2 billion a year. Today, the trade between China and the U.S. is $2 billion a day. So the effect that we're seeing here is astronomical. And like all types of conflicts, this sounds very sweet and appeals to nationalists domestically until the first victims come home. And in this case, this is also going to hit U.S. consumers, who, of course, pay for tariffs in the form of essentially what are taxes. And it's going to hit U.S. manufacturers, too. Right. You're going to see stock prices of Qualcomm, Intel, Broadcom drop.
All right, we'll leave it there. Daniel Levin, thank you so much.